Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm for Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today, I'm trying to run until dawn with the GTX 1650 Super, which is below the minimum requirements in here. The minimum is a 1660 with 6 gigabytes of VRAM, and I just have a 1650 Super with 4 gigabytes of VRAM. So I decided to take a try and see how it fares with the VRAM constraints and the possible lower performance. And I must say that I'm surprised with the performance in here. So I started off with 1080p low settings and using TSR to 67% quality, which is kind of upscaling from 720p to 1080p, very similar to what DLSS quality does or FSR3 does from its quality mode, which both of them does does upscale from 720p to 1080p. So I'm using that on the TSR, which is the built-in upscaler from Unreal. The issue with TSR, in my opinion, is that it's way more demanding than DLSS or even FSR. But the issue is the 1650 Super doesn't support DLSS, and also the game doesn't offer any support for FSR. So you either use the TAAU, which is the default upscaler method, which is TAA, and you reduce the resolution scaling, and that's it, which is very basic one, or you either go with TSR. So I decided to go with TSR using all settings in here, and to be honest, the game looks very good. Even at the low settings, the performance is great. The only thing that I can probably put the finger on is at the low settings there is a lot of pop-in, but I believe you can personalize that and put I don't know, VM distance instead of near. You can put by to far or to middle and prevent those issues. And the other thing that you have in both settings that you don't have on the other settings is that shadows are kind of art shadows, and they are not dynamic shadows. So basically all the shadows from the environment, from the trees, they are just static shadows. They are not dynamic. Although I barely knew about this because I started to record and trying out the game with the low settings. So for me, I thought really the game was like this, and the shadows did look very good. I mean, look at this, the shadows look good at low settings. I don't have any issue with this. It's good. Although when you move on, for example, to median, those shadows get, instead of being static, they are dynamic, but their quality gets worse because of them being dynamic. But of course, that is the opinion. That's kind of a complicated opinion. Each one will have its own opinion regarding the shadow quality and stuff like that. But let me say, the game looks really good at both settings. That's the thing. I can probably play the game entirely at both settings, having a frame rate above 60 frames per second with no issues. There might be areas where the game will run slightly lower than 60, but I can see that the majority of the experience probably it will be above 60 frames per second. And even the textures on both settings, it does look really good for both settings. So very good job in that sense. Although, and unfortunately, just like all the other massive games developments, we have issues with Unreal Engine stuttering. In here, we don't have as much stutter as the other runs that I did because the shader compilation pass already have gone through. But still, there are a lot of stuttering. Sometimes from when you move the camera. I mean, when the camera goes from one character to another, you can see sometimes a little bit of stutter. Sometimes you go a texture fading in and out. I believe that might be related with the VRAM, but it's nothing really that severe. I think it's pretty good, and I'm impressed because we are below the minimum requirements. We don't have enough VRAM, and yet the game plays really well. So I'm surprised in that sense when it comes to the performance. Now let me show you how it looks on median settings while using TSR. Alright. So 1080p, TSR at 67%, median settings, textures on low because, well, VRAM of course. And let's go. So the performance that you can expect in here is obviously worse than the most settings, but you can expect an experience above 45 frames per second. So it's a good choice if you have a variable refresh rate screen, a good one, because it might make the game to look, you know, very stable. So some differences that I immediately noticed in the median settings, like I told you, shadows are, this time around, they are not static. I mean, the shadows from the environment and the trees move, there are shadows of the trees moving. Although the resolution of these shadows are, well, way worse. They are softened, very well filtered, but still very worse, much worse, I mean. So it's kind of a tough decision to make. Either you have static with good resolution shadows but hard shadows, or you have dynamic shadows which looks way too soft and very low resolution. And yeah, it's a decision that you need to make. Alright. Other differences that I've noticed is that you start to have depth of field in these cutscenes, which is pretty much the entire game. All of the environment gets a blur pass from behind. Some people don't like this, but I do prefer to have this. This is a very cinematic game, so it makes sense to have depth of field, but it's your choice, of course. Tessellation on the snow, which is the trails where your character moves or animals or anything. It's a little bit different compared to the low settings. This one seems more softer and shaded, which sometimes looks a little bit weird, but it's different, alright. On the low it looks more hard, but more crispy. On medium setting it looks more softer, but it seems like it has some kind of noise with the shading. So it's a kind of a weird thing. And the good thing that I've noticed in the medium settings is that obviously pop-in is much reduced, so it's much better in that sense, and that's the difference. Alright, so it doesn't guarantee you perfect 60 frames per second. Of course you will have drops below 60, but I mean, if you don't care about that, or if you have a very low refresh rate screen, I think median settings is pretty good, because you get a lot of stuff that you didn't get before. Oh, also, volumetric lighting on the menu. It says that on the low settings you don't get any volumetric lights. It's a little bit weird, because on the low settings it seems that there is a lot of volumetric fog and stuff like that going around in all the places. So it doesn't seem to be disabled. And on the median settings you just get pretty much the same thing, or a little bit more refined, so there is not really too much of a difference, but I might be not looking very well into that feature. Alright, so let's move on to high settings, TSR with textures on low. So 1080p, high settings, textures on low, TSR on its quality mode. I was a little bit surprised with the performance, so obviously we get worse performance in median settings, but we still are at 40s, sometimes 30s, but it stays well above 30 frames per second. Probably there will be demanding moments where it will be close to the lower 30s, or who knows, it might drop below 30, but that this scenario is quite far from that happening. So if you want to play this game with a 30 frames per second lock, which is kind of understandable, given that this is kind of a cinematic game. It doesn't really need you to have great reflections or anything like it. I think this is a very good setting for you to go with. Alright, so that's my suggestion. If you want to target 30 frames per second, this is a good choice, honestly. One of the improvements that I do notice by going with this high setting, it is on shadow quality. That's the immediately thing that I've noticed. It's still very soft. They have a very soft approach, but the resolution it's much improved in that sense. But yeah, performance is quite good. And then after this, I decided to move on, obviously, to the same settings but without TSR and using native TAA. Try. It's pretty much 1080p, like I said, and the only thing I did change it was to disable TSR in here. So I just disabled TSR, put the resolution scaling to 100%. So basically it's 1080p using TAA. You can use 1080p with TSR, which does improve. It's a better anti-aliasing solution. Although, yeah, it's more demanding. Alright, so I decided to stick up with the regular TAA instead of TSR, but using native resolution. So I was expecting worse. The game just keeps above 30 frames per second, with some frame times going those under 30 frames per second, alright? So if you want a perfect lock 30 frames per second, you won't be having them. because of those same moments. And also, I believe there will be more demanding moments where the game will drop below 30 frames per second. I'm pretty sure of that. So I don't think that's a good solution unless you really hate upscalers or you really hate TSR. I don't see this as a good solution. Probably if you want to play with native resolution without using TSR, probably try to go with median and using native resolution if you want, instead of going to the high setting. One of the things that I've noticed with using TAA is that it seems that TSR, despite it's in a very lower resolution than native TAA, it fixes some of the issues. There are some stuff which with the native resolution and TAA looks better, but there are some other moments which with TSR it does filter some of the stuff way better, even at scaling from 720p. So that's a curious thing. TSR is really strong, but its performance penalty it's kind of harsh, in my opinion. So to end up this video, I want to say that my favorite settings to play this game is either you go, and this is my own opinion, either go with the low settings, lock the game at 60 frames per second, and enjoy the game in a very silky smooth, aside from the stutters that keeps appearing. Have a very stable 60 frames per second with drops that can happen from here and there. Also, some of the stutter, it seems to be CPU related. Sometimes the CPU just goes to 90%. As far as I've tried, I'm not sure if there are shaders to be compiled that are not compiled at the beginning of the game or not. But yeah, sometimes the CPU just ramps up a lot to compile a shader or something, and there is a big stutter. So who knows? But the thing is, you can have those, when it comes to the GPU power, low settings, using TSR, and upscaling from 720p to 1080p, it's enough to have 60 frames per second stable most of the time. But of course, it does depend. That's when I tried the game, it was enough. But if the game gets more demanding moments, who knows? But there is still overhead for that. And if you want to target 30 frames per second, a more cinematic experience, in my opinion, you should go with the high settings using TSR. Alright, and if you have a variable refresh rate screen and you want to keep a frame rate close to 60 frames per second, my recommendation is for you to go with the median settings and using TSR to upscale from 720p to 1080p. So I think that's all, folks, that I want to talk about until dawn when it comes to the performance. I don't want to discuss what's wrong with this remake, because if you go to the Steam page, people will say. You can go in there and read what's wrong with the game, but I want to add something that it's not written in there, is that they changed entirely the art style of the game. This scene on the original game, it's pitch black, it's nighttime, and in here it seems like it's sunset or something like that. It's weird. The impact, it's truly weird. I don't know who the hell came up with this idea. But if you are going to remaster or remake a game that it's exactly the same as the previous one, why changing entirely how the game looks visually when it comes to art style? I don't understand. This is one of the complaints, that it's not written on the Steam page, but if you go to the Steam page, there is a lot of other hateful comments about the game, which I do agree. Alright, so weird work that have been done with Until Dawn, which for people that play the original, this is really bad in my opinion. But for me, that I never played the original and I just watched some comparisons on YouTube, well, I can go and play this game with no remorse. But for people that play the original and go for this one, they will find this very weird. Alright, so that's it, guys. Thank you a lot for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
What are you doing? How could you do that? Chris, that is so effed up.
What?
That poor little guy was alive about 10 seconds ago.
Oh, come on. Squirrels are just rats with bushy tails.
I cannot believe you just did that.
Jesus, are you okay?
This mountain is freaking me out already.
Hey, look, our cable car's coming. Let's grab our ride.